welcome. My name is Chris Ajemian. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the CEO and founder of Kate's Tutoring and Educational Services. We're a advising, sort of tutoring and innovation company based in New York and London. And we work with people in the college access and graduate school access spaces primarily. I'll be your co-host for today, and I hope that you're all doing well and safe during this time. I'm honored to be joined by our guest today and my dear friend, Limor Weinstein. For those of you who don't know Limor, she's a licensed psychotherapist. She has a master's degree from Columbia, as well as from the University of New York, which is CUNY. And she's worked as a therapist in private practice for over 15 years now. She's also a successful entrepreneur, having founded LW Wellness Network, as well as in the last few years, sort of evolved that into Bespoke Wellness Partners. And they recently opened a new wellness center on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. So that's amazing. Limor is also the mother of 3 children and once held a position as a commander in the Israeli military. So word of advice, don't piss her off. So, Limor, thanks so much for joining us today. Hope you're well. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great. I'm very excited for our conversation. So a little housekeeping before we get started. I'll facilitate today's conversation. If you have any questions at any point in time, please ask them in the Q&A panel as opposed to the chat thread. And you can access the Q&A panel by scrolling over the bottom of your screen. Additionally, for what I think is the best experience, you may want to set your screen to gallery view, which you can do by scrolling over the top right corner of your browser and selecting gallery. You may also want to click on view options at the top of your screen and select side-by-side mode. So Limor and I appear side-by-side on your screen, as well as next to the slides. We have slides in the same window. So our topic for today is helping students adjust to a school year like no other. And specifically, we want to review what families can do to sort of maintain students' and parents' mental health and academic progress in this uncertain environment. Now, if we don't get to your question today, we've had a number of questions submitted in the registration, and we'll have some live Q&A questions, of course. If we don't get to something that you wanted to sort of hear about or talk about, or if you have a question that's, of more private nature, you are welcome to contact either one of us. I'm thinking maybe more Limor. You can contact the Kate's team at info@katestutoring.com, as well as our 2 phone numbers, depending on where you live. Or Limor and her team at info@bespokewellnesspartners.com. And then they have their 917-670-9780 number there. So Limor, wanted to kind of start with just a little bit of background and kind of help people understand sort of how you and I came to be doing this together. So I'll take it off the slides for now so people can sort of like see us talk. And what I would love to just first kind of talk about is, how you and I met. And, in my memory, we were introduced by our mutual friend, Juliet Regatius. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, Juliet's a great friend. And she's also, we worked with her kids. She's a member of the BNI network and just an amazing human being, fantastic sort of like connector. And just, she always knows, I think, how to sort of match people up who might be simpatico, and that's certainly been my experience. So, but Limor, your backstory. So you've had a really fascinating life experience, and I know it's really sort of deeply impacted your practice as a therapist, and that sort of in turn has influenced how you're advising families on managing during or throughout the pandemic. And I was just hoping you could maybe kind of tell us a little bit about your own backstory and how you came to be where you are today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And first of all, I did see that when we met, like you had this passion and understanding about mental health, which is, among other things, really attracted me to you and your company and your mission. So Thank you again for having me. And yes, so I grew up in Israel in a very challenging environment and poverty and abuse, and had to leave home when I was 12 years old. And I've dealt with anxiety and depression and a lot of other negative feelings throughout the year, and didn't really get the right support because of the stigma associated with it and because of some other reasons. But like for me, what really helped me throughout the whole thing is education, and knowing that one day I will you know go to school and empower myself with the right uh, credits or credentials. And I struggled with anorexia and bulimia from age 14 to 24. And that's it. I mean, now I'm 20 years later, working as a therapist, specializing in eating disorders. But that's a little bit about myself.
Well, one of the things that I really love about your story is when we talk about the work that the Kate's team and I are really passionate about. It's this idea of identity development through education and using education opportunities, whether it's your middle school math class, your high school AP, U.S. history class, or classes in college, or just like the overall trajectory into graduate school, into your career. Using that as a process of really kind of working on yourself and figuring out who you want to be, what impact you want to have on the world. And I think one of the things I've always admired about you is I feel like you're really a role model of that. So again, thank you for sharing that story. And it's just a reminder of why your work resonates so well with ours. So thank you for that. All right, so let's sort of hop into some of the probably more sort of pressing kind of questions. So I want to sort of talk about the challenges that teens are facing, what to do about them. So let's talk about that. And obviously, students across the country are having to adjust to a whole new way of studying Limor. Their social lives are transformed. Many might feel as though they're missing out on some of the biggest moments in their young lives, whether it's like the prom or like the school trip. There's some pretty grim statistics out there. One that I saw in June was from the ROX Institute, that's ROX, which found that 80% of adolescent girls are feeling more lonely and isolated, that's a quote, than before the pandemic hit. What are you seeing in your practice right now? And, in your experience, what specifically are the challenges that teens are facing, from what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see an increase in anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation. But, it is interesting that a lot of the studies are about girls, but there is definitely an increase in boys. I mean, I have like probably 20% or 30% of my practice is male.
Mhm.
And I feel like the male population is kind of being, not getting the right attention, but there's definitely an increase because of the isolation, because of all the uncertainty that's happening in kids very, very anxious. And now with school on top of it and colleges and having to deal with what's going on in the world and academics, I mean, that adds another layer of stress on a lot of kids. So it's definitely a big issue.
Right. And, some of the things that you've said, particularly with respect to suicidal ideation and, kind of cutting are, I mean, they're pretty disturbing and they're pretty scary. I mean, let's face it. Right. And we're actually going to kind of come back to that in a bit, because I know you have sort of showed me previously that there are actually things that we can do to kind of help circumvent these. So kind of just sort of continuing a little bit more about sort of you and your background, how it sort of informs the work that you do. We were talking earlier about, you're from Israel, and I know that you and your siblings were all sent to different kibbutzes. And, would you mind, firstly telling me a little about how that separation impacted you at that time? And secondly, what insights does that experience give you on what kids across the country are experiencing today, whether in terms of being separated from their friends, or unable to see their grandparents, or maybe even having, especially recently, lost a loved one?
Right. I mean, it's a little bit different because we were kind of forced to leave home to three different families and three different kibbutz in Israel. But you're right. I mean, the fact that we had to, leave home, like a lot of people are, leaving home right now for different places and dealing with, friends moving away from them. I mean, that, on its own creates a lot of, it's a traumatic experience just to leave the comfort zone or to have someone else, leaving and, creating just, a lot of fears and vulnerability. And, I think that, there's so many tips that I can have, like, of course, now looking back at, what I could have done differently. But, I think that one of the most important things that I can, like talk about is having like self-talk, like knowing to, talk to yourself. And one of my most favorite skill that I'm sure we'll get into, but it's cognitive behavior therapy, is knowing that we have the power to redirect our thoughts, So just, I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit about what cognitive behavior therapy is. I don't know how much people know about it, but just the concept of, what we tell ourselves is the most important thing. So yes, this is, so many traumatic things are happening and sad things, but the most important thing is what we are telling ourselves about the situation, which affects how we're feeling about it. So
So one of the things that we've sort of developed in our practice, and this was really the focus of my research at the education school at Harvard, is the role of emotion in identity development during adolescence. And without getting sort of deep in the weeds on it, one of the sort of like really sort of key components to developing the identity that you want to be embodying is this idea of positive self-talk.
mhm.
So I think it's interesting how that notion, whether you're, dealing with someone who's working through questions of mental illness or just, issues related to wellness, or frankly, like preparing for the SAT, you know, this idea of positive self-talk just seems to kind of travel really well. And it seems to be really transferable to all different sort of contexts, of life, whether it's academic or personal. So I love that. And I love, how in your work, you're always talking about not just the importance of self-talk, but really as self-talk as a tool for the validation of the self.
Mhm.
So I really love that. So, you already sort of discussed how as a result of the pandemic, a lot of kids are struggling, excuse me, and experiencing mental health issues really for the first time. Again, you're talking about before about suicidal ideation and cutting. And I know from my own conversations with clients that, this is a huge source of worry for parents right now, particularly as kids start this new school year and face what might be, to put it lightly, a bumpy transition into a very different school experience. So, what would you say are the signs that parents should be looking out for, indications that perhaps their kid is struggling, and needs some extra support?
Right. So I feel like the basic ones are, lack of appetite, just difficulty sleeping, like not really socializing with other people, not eating or maybe eating too much, and just kind of like altogether negative talk, like negative kind of
Mm.
mood. And just even like the mood is just one day they could be happy and all of a sudden they're like really sad. And a lot of kids now are getting panic attack and anxiety attack because of, I mean, everything that's happening is, too much. And I love that you put the emphasis on emotions, because a lot of parents just want their kids to, they're not waking up to school, they're screaming at them, they're yelling, they're getting upset, and really not paying attention to how they're feeling, which is, really, really important to pay attention to. So I'm happy that you are bringing this to light.
So it's interesting. The more you sort of talk about your practice, the more I see just again how kind of sort of mission aligned we are. And one of the things too that sort of came out of the research that I've done in my own sort of practice is you know we have a theory of change, and it's basically if you can learn to manage your emotions, then you
Mhm.
can regulate your mood. And then it's in the mood regulation that's what allows you to kind of develop or embody your ideal identity. So this concept of mood, that's really the key. And I totally agree that developing skills of self-regulation, so we can manage those emotions in the moment. Then we're able to manipulate a mood and really a positive mood environment. And that not only helps ourselves, it helps other people. I mean, to be quite frank, I struggle with this like every single morning with my own kids, kind of getting up and look, we're all under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress right now. And, you know, let's just say I'm not maybe my best self, my best version of myself in the morning. And I can just see how, like, if I establish a positive mood in the morning, man, day has a much stronger chance of kind of going the way that I want it to. If I establish a negative mood in the morning, and I have complete control over this, right? Like you're saying, that can lead to an entirely different day experience. So I'd love to just for a second, what are some tactics that you may sort of recommend or suggest to your students about how they can actually sort of control the mood that they create?
That's very good. You're talking about like the parents, because I love how you were just, talking about the parent as a role model. And you're right, like it's very hard or very challenging to be a parent, today with everything that's happening. And you first have to, kind of check in with yourself as a parent, like, how am I feeling? Like,
Right.
what is it like? How is it for me? And there's one, it's called the Calm Approach. And there's a great YouTube, like we can put the link later on,
Mhm.
by Dr. Kalari, where the CALM stands for connecting, affect, listening, and mirroring. I love all these acronyms, so you probably hear them along the way. But basically, what she's saying is like it's important to connect. You really want to like connect to your child or connect to whoever you're dealing with, and then not just connect and pretend like you're feeling okay, but it has to show on your affect that you are, feeling a certain way. And the L stands for listening. So really, really listening. How many of us are really listening, right? Many of us think about millions of other things when your kid is talking or when anyone is talking to you. And the last one is just like mirroring. So you listen to your child and then you mirror, you kind of reflect on what he's saying. So it's a very simple technique. And I feel like even just the checking in with yourself is huge.
Have you heard of Laura Markham?
What is she? Just remind me again.
She's child psychologist, but she wrote this book called Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids. And a lot of what you're saying kind of resonates with kind of what she covers in that book. And it's interesting. You can like read the preface to this book, and like that might be like all that one needs. But like what you're saying, she has these very sort of like simple sort of techniques. And what she's saying, she boils down to three principles, right? Again, peaceful parent, happy kid. So number one, this idea of self-regulation. You have to be able to control yourself. And some of the
Yeah.
things that you're sharing right now are actually tactics for that. Then secondly, it's this idea of fostering connection,
Hmm.
right? So developing a really strong relationship with your child over time, really through a series of smaller engagements, right? Whether it's like helping your own daughter or son, put the toothpaste in the toothbrush, sitting down with them and having they're struggling with say like a homework assignment, or just sort of like again just finding other ways, even casually, to again foster connection. And the third thing that she recommends is this idea of coaching rather than controlling. So I know for myself, in the mornings, I always try to, self-regulate. I try to foster connection with the kids, and I try to coach rather than control. To say that, I'm failing miserably at it is probably an understatement, but I'm trying at least. I'm trying.
That's pretty normal, nobody, but yeah, that it's all like a very similar. There's also the Imago dialogue. It's really originally was for couple therapy. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but the
Mm,
whole concept of the Imago dialogue, it's actually a brilliant technique,
yeah.
and I use it with teenagers too. And it basically tells you how to, you mirror and reflect, you
Hmm.
validate, and then you show empathy and compassion.
I love that.
So it's actually so brilliant. And if we had like some time to model it, it is one of the most useful technique. And actually I use it for teenagers so they can
Mm.
manipulate their parents and get whatever they want. So that's like a secret. Yes, it's actually pretty cool. But literally all you have to do is if let's say you're like, hey, like whatever, if you're angry, let's just play a role. We have a minute to play a role.
Yeah, sure, let's do it.
All right, let's just pretend that you are the parent. Like, no, I'm going to be the parent and you are the
Okay.
kid. Hey, Chris, like you have to study for your SATs. Like, you're playing on your computer too much. Just come on. Like,
Don't want to do it. Sorry.
all right, so most parents would be like boiling and getting angry and like just out of control.
Mhm.
But all you have to do is just like, oh, like I see that you are, busy on your computer and that's very interesting and you are fascinated by whatever you're doing. You know what? It makes sense that you would want to do that. That's the validation. If I was your age, I would have done exactly the same thing.
Mhm.
Then you move to the feeling. It must feel really good to do something that you love, right? Once you
Mhm.
do that imago dialogue thing, and look at you, you're already happy, so I've done something right.
This
Once
is,
you,
by the way, it's working. I'm actually feeling it internally. You're turning me over to you
I
have
am
me
telling
questions
you.
more.
And then the parents come and then I have to like kind of work on the parent on this. But it's pretty cool to see how, when you connect to the child, when you really put yourself in their shoes, like
Mhm.
you can open them up to doing whatever it is you want to do and say whatever it is that you want to say when they can actually hear you. So I love the Imago dialogue. I highly recommend looking
Well,
into it.
that's really fascinating because I know that as we sort of enter the school year, at least some kids are returning to their physical school buildings, and a lot of them are feeling anxiety about this.
Yeah.
So like your SAT question might be, akin to a student, not wanting to actually go to school, right, that day. And, maybe maybe that's because they're getting worried about getting sick from the virus themselves, or maybe even passing on to family members. And I feel like, and thinking about how parents should talk to their kids about like these types of risks or these types of questions and how to manage their feelings around them when you talk about calm and imago dialogue, that seems to make sense. But I know you also have a couple of other tactics, like I think like the I statement or in some other techniques. Is that right?
Yes, yes. And it's literally when your child does something, instead of just like blaming them and saying, you always do that, you're so lazy, you kind of make it, and it's like there's a three-part to it. It's like when you act a certain way, it
Mhm.
makes me feel because. So
Right.
basically, let's say, like I'm, working so many hours a week and I come home and the place is a mess, instead of just like, you're so lazy, you never do anything, you can just, yeah, and then like you're like shaking your head like most parents, you
Mhm.
can, just kind of make it about you. Like when when I see you, like, when I see the place like in this condition, it makes me feel like, like whatever the feeling is, because, I work all day and I, want to provide to the family and whatever it is you want to say. But that way you're not, instead of a you're making it about like this is happening and it's affecting me. It's about me and how I am feeling. So it's less threatening to the child.
Right. So as people are thinking about, you know, going back into their actual school buildings, how might you take the tactic that you're talking about, and maybe talk to their kids about these risks and how to manage the feelings around them, like specifically for like going back to school?
I think the most important thing is validating.
Okay.
Just like validating, this is hard. This is different. This is a huge change and it is very scary. There's just I feel like instead of like a lot of parents, what is our initial instinct is to like, you're gonna be fine. This is, you're trying to protect the child and in a way like dismiss, not knowing, right? Like we're dismissing what they're saying or what they're thinking. But if you really, really just, focus on validating them, you know what? You're right. It is very scary to go into a building where everybody's wearing masks, where they take your temperature, where the parents have to like go on an app and click whatever before you go in. I mean, it is anxiety provoking to adults, to everyone. So I think the best thing that the parent can do is really validate their child. And like we were saying earlier, like check in with yourself, like, what is it that I am feeling? And you know what? Like I would even encourage parents, be honest with your child. Like I am feeling very, I'm scared. I don't know. Like I am whatever it is that you are feeling, don't try to brush it off. Like if you want to cry and if you want to be sad in front of your kid, like let it out. Like be honest with yourself. You're modeling this behavior of, you know what, I'm feeling this and it's okay to feel whatever it is.
Well, Limor, I didn't quite expect our talk today to be like seemingly a personal therapy session. So I'm just going to say thank you right now.
Then you
This is
feel
wonderful.
afterwards.
I'm going to watch this video over and over and over again, just so I can actually train myself to do these things. It sounds really actionable, right? Which I love.
I'll send you all
Um,
the handouts if any of you, if you would help to send handouts. I have a lot of great handouts for.
Great. That would be great. Thank you. So just two more things I wanted to touch upon in terms of students before we go over to parents. So for the kids who are learning remotely, either entirely or for part of the week, what are some ways for them to keep up with their motivation when coming from home?
Right. And I think like again, I'm gonna know I keep repeating. I mean, there is like an acronym for motivational interviewing. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it's a
No, I
pretty
haven't.
cool technique. They use it for drug and alcohol, but and the acronym is actually RULE, RULE.
Okay.
And R stands for resisting. So the first thing you want to do as a parent is resist telling the kid what to do. Because if I told you to stop drinking or to stop smoking or to stop staring at your iPad, you're going to be like, yeah. And then you're going to go in the bathroom, you're going to hide, and you're going to do whatever you want to do. Right.
Yeah.
And so you really don't, that doesn't work. You want to avoid doing this at the beginning. And then you want to just understand what is going on with the kid. Like be really, really, really curious. Like I feel that, as a parent, you want to like move from a reactive state to responding. And I feel like I used to I used to be stressed all the time, but now I'm actually like stress inspires me and motivates me because I literally learned to, I know it's pretty cool. You kind of move from a reactive state to a responding. So when you're dealing with your child, instead of just like, oh my God, that child is driving me crazy and I want to scream, I want to pull my hair or break something, you're going to be like, okay, let me move into a responsive state. So you are like kind of activating your parasympathetic nervous system and like breathing. And then you are asking questions. You're like, I'm going to be curious and I'm going to ask questions instead of just like driving myself crazy and being stressed about whatever is happening. And I know it's like a lot of different things, but if you just think about like in terms of the motivation factor, is don't tell the kid what to do, like come from an understanding, listen to them, and then figure out how you can empower them. So like find out what is it that they're passionate about. Like if school is, like not something they want to do right now and they're really feeling anxious and upset, like what do they like? Do they like photography? Do they like art? Like what do they like? Dance, whatever it is, get them to do more of what they like to do. And that's how you kind of get to motivate them to move in the right direction instead of crushing them and making them feel worse.
It's really funny because again, I'm like the epitome of like a bad parent, at least with respect to what you recommend as, better parenting.
Hmm.
But what's ironic about it is that as a professional, a lot of what you're talking about in terms of motivation, this idea of empowerment is also what we use in our practice, which is, we always ask our students the first time we sit down with them, 15 years from now, we're having coffee catching up, who do you want to be, right? What impact do you want to have on your community and why? And one of the reasons why the students do, well in our program is because the work that they're doing in school and outside of school is contextualized within a sense of greater purpose, right? And you're kind of that's exactly what you're talking about when you're talking about motivation. So it's great kind of talking to another professional and kind of hearing how they do, use sort of similar concepts to kind of break down walls. And, for whatever reason, I'm unable to see that for myself in my own like kind of personal life. So it's just like awesome to kind of hear you talk about it and sort of see the connections between, how you go about the work and now how we might kind of go about the work. Also, for anyone who's interested in learning more about like how to do school from home, on March 25th of this year, we did a webinar on turning your kitchen into your classroom. Again, that's on March 25th. I recommend that you check it out. There's some pretty good tips in there, sort of on this topic, and also some more practical tips as to how to like do learning from home kind of well. And so that might be of use to you. So, a little more last question before we go on to parents. I know that a lot of students are finding that the experience of the pandemic and remote learning has brought to the fore issues with organization and with being able to fully concentrate on and complete their schoolwork. What advice do you have for these students and also for the parents?
Like in terms of like what?
Organization, so basic executive functioning, as
Oh,
well
yeah.
as concentrating and completing their schoolwork.
Oh, right. Organizing organization at home. Yes. I feel like that, it's so hard to get organized when you have a mess in your head. So my best advice, and like I don't know what you think about it as the academic person, is to
Mm.
create an environment that is peaceful and beautiful. I always think that like if you open somebody's closet and if it's a messy closet, it represents something that's happening internally. So I always,
Absolutely.
yeah, we're gonna open your closet now. I mean, I really think that you should just create a space that's like warm and inviting. And, there is like a workspace and there is a eating space and there is a TV space. So it's all kind of like separated and organized. And even for the parents, so that they, like that kind of reflects what's going on. And there are a lot of like different tips and visuals and different clocks, depending on, what specific issue the person is dealing with. But I mean, I think that like the best tip is an organized space, and even like you can get like a one of these boards and stickies, and just make sure that you have visuals that are helping you to stay organized when everything else is chaotic.
But it's funny because when I first started as a tutor, like, I don't know, 20 years ago, I was, living in New York City. And, in New York City, at least for private tutoring, it's often done in the home. And sometimes, or I say most of the time, in the student's bedroom. And I found it really sort of interesting to kind of walk into those spaces because you're exactly right. The physical sort of complexion or reality of a student's room is probably a mirror of their internal reality. And
Mhm.
so, I really stand by what you say, and I certainly support it. My question, and this is kind of a personal question, is so we've actually done what you've recommended here in my home. The kids have their own desk space. The kids have obviously they have a bedroom, they have their bed, and you sleep in your bed and you eat at the kitchen table and you do your work at the desk. That like worked for like 3 days. And so like this morning, for example, my younger daughter was working on her school given iPad, doing her work on the floor of her bedroom. My older daughter was literally doing an advisory session with her students, with her classmates and her advisor, on her Chromebook with literally like the dog on like the dog mat. So like what I'm honestly asking here,
Yeah.
how should I approach that tomorrow morning if I see the same thing happening?
You know what? This is a great question. I want to go back to what you were saying about bad parenting. There are no bad parenting. There is no like parenting doesn't come with like a workbook, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's so I feel like it's like you have to pick your battles. Parents call me, they're like, oh my God, my kid is on the phone all the time. If your daughter like is comfortable doing her work on the dog bed, let her do it. Like, I feel like you have to pick your battles. And I think that actually makes it a little bit more exciting. So maybe like change location, maybe like let them eat on the deck. I mean, make it like don't be very rigid and very strict, because I feel like, if you can make it more fun and light, and we all make mistakes, we all like mess up. The most important thing is just to kind of repair whatever it is that you have done. If you yell at the kid, or if some parents do more than yelling, I feel like there are always opportunities to go back and make them feel better.
Well, it's funny because my older daughter, Hannah, has gotten pretty good at managing dad, to
Oh,
the point where she's pretty emotionally intelligent. And I really admire the tools and resources that she's developed internally, and really through the support of her her advisors and like say school psychologists who have helped her with this. And she's always been good about asking for help and whatever. And she said to me today, after I was sort of like, why are you doing your work on the dog bed with the dog? Is that a distraction? You can't be doing as well as you could be doing. She said, well, actually, Dad, I am doing better. And I said to her, I'm like, okay, well, what's the evidence? What's the data? She's like, well, I've been doing this, whatever assignment she was doing. And upstairs, I kept on getting this one type of question wrong, 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 wrong. And my points went from like 5,000 to 3,000 or whatever it was. And she said, since I've been on the dog bed doing the work with Brooklyn, who's our dog, I've actually gotten 4,000 points in a row or whatever it was. So she came right back to me with like, evidence. And I said, okay.
What you actually did is amazing because you were able to listen to her. You were like, wait, tell me more. You were curious, right? Instead of just like get out of the dog's bed, you did the responsive, right? And like asking questions and like maybe she's got another way that works for her. So I feel like that's, you did
There's hope for me. There's hope for me yet. So
and one more, like if I have a couple more really important tips, but I feel like one that is very easy for most parents to practice is even breathing. Like, and it might sound silly, but like sometimes we forget how to breathe. And a lot of us don't even know how to breathe properly. So most of us breathe from our chest instead of like diaphragmatic breathing. So if
right.
you really just like count, like, inhale 2 and exhale 2, you're able to just like calm yourself down like almost automatically. So even just doing that even breathing exercise 2-4 or whatever the even number is, like you would feel like more calm. So
I feel like the biggest hypocrite because oftentimes when people are asking how to manage their emotions during testing, which is a big deal, right? Whether it's SAT, ACT, IC, GRE, whatever. I always say to them, if you can connect with your breath, you can connect with yourself. And so I'll say, just stop, breathe in, breathe out. Do that 3 times and refocus and recenter yourself. So it sounds like, in some ways I should be listening to my own advice. I think I may have missed my calling, maybe going into, psychotherapy. Psychology was what I should have done.
There is a synergy between like, education and, the emotional well-being, which is why you are, so great to talk about it and do this webinar.
So, well, I appreciate that, Limor. Thank you. You're helping me kind of, hang on to my integrity here. So let's move over now to challenges that parents are facing right now during, the situation. So obviously the students are just one side of the equation. What challenges are you seeing parents facing in trying to manage this unprecedented situation that maybe we haven't quite had a chance to hit on just yet?
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge that parents have right now is to kind of manage their work or personal life and dealing with the kids. It's like we're trying to do the best we can and like work and maintain our work, right? A lot of people are losing their job.
Yeah.
And at the same time, to be a parent and attend to our kids' academic needs and emotional needs. And I mean, it's a lot. Like we got to figure out how to deal with ourselves and our relationship. I mean, a lot of couples are, breaking during this pandemic and people just are driving each other insane. But I think it's just being in a small space is challenging enough. And then having the kids study from home for a lot of parents is just adding so much more stress.
And so, it's interesting because my next question was really about this idea of like, shifting burdens, right? So obviously parents are struggling themselves and don't know how to share a lot of their own issues with their kids. We may want to maintain an open relationship, but sometimes in doing so, we kind of like shift our own stuff onto the kids, and the kids are already managing so much. Like, I even know like in my own experience, like sometimes when I get maybe a little bent out of shape during the day, it's not because of the kids, because of what's going on at work. What do you have to say? What's your advice for people like me or parents like me or other parents who are also struggling to kind of like, with this balance?
Yeah, and I think that that's a very good question. And I think I mentioned it earlier, just kind of be honest with your kid. I was like, we were supposed to open this center March 14th, right when the pandemic happened.
Oh my God, like almost like to
I
the
know,
day.
like literally the same day, and like it didn't happen, and we were literally opening just now, and I was driving myself crazy with like everything coming and putting this big space together. We have 6 offices and a yoga studio, and I was like super busy and stressed and creating the coaching program. And my kids, like they've seen it. I came home and I was just like, the last thing I want to do is like hear the whining and crying. As much as I love my kids, they're amazing. But I think that what I ended up doing is just like just telling them like, hey, listen, the next week, the next 3 or 4 weeks are going to be very tough, and I'm sorry, and I love you, and it's nothing personal, because kids take everything personal.
Right.
But I feel like just kind of like being open and honest with them. And if you feel like sad, or if you're stressed, just share with your kids how you're feeling. I mean, my grandma passed away right like 3 weeks after this pandemic, and I attended a virtual funeral. I mean, that is insane.
Sorry to hear that.
But and I was sad, and I was crying next to my kids. I feel like it's okay to let the kids that to let your kids know that you're feeling sad and anxious, or whatever it is you're feeling.
Well, it's interesting because I saw you give an interview with BBC a while back, and you were describing your work with families, and you spoke about how, you mentioned this today, right? How, not to judge or kind of call out bad parenting, either on your own, your own doing, or, that of what you may perceive in others. And that's really been, resonating with me, kind of throughout this session today, as was also just in the lead up to it. And I think that message, this idea of not being too judgmental towards yourself and others, being flexible, right, like you're saying before, is so important at this time when many parents are concerned that they aren't doing a good enough job. Are there any other like self-care tips that you recommend for parents right now, with this idea of like not being too judgmental, in addition to what you've already said?
Yeah, and actually, I'm so happy that you mentioned that, because that's another huge challenge that parents are dealing with. It's like that feeling of guilt, like it's
Yes.
never enough, like it's never enough. And I think, and I was just talking to like one of my clients this morning, is like a big tip is like take care of yourself, self-care, like work out, meditate, do whatever it is that, like if you play the guitar, like take 5 minutes a day to play guitar. Take, like put lotion on your body, like whatever it is. I know it sounds silly, but even the tiny little things will make you feel like, you are important. You know how they always say, as a parent, we have to put the mask on ourselves before we
Absolutely, yeah, on the
on our
plane.
kids. How many of us actually do that, right? How many of us actually take care of themselves, take care of your health, and all the rest will follow. I mean, you mentioned before, like as parent, we project our own issues and insecurities and baggage onto our kids and other people. Like, be aware of that. I mean, I think that awareness of what is it that we are doing, how are we contributing to whatever is happening with the kids, just that is a huge tip, I feel, just having that awareness.
Well, I'll sort of help us kind of wrap up this part of the this segment before we go on to learn more about the kind of support that you provide. But I know for myself, I might be kind of being a little hard on myself during like sort of like today's session. But I know for myself, every morning, or really every day, I get up and I have to do at least, 3 things. Number one, I'll do a journal entry,
Okay.
right? And even if I just write down 3 words, I'll do it. Sometimes in my journal entry, if I'm really kind of feeling down on myself, I'll write myself fan mail, right? Calling myself, the president of my own fan club, if you will, just sort of writing myself like, positive messages kind of coming from within. That's helpful. So this idea of journaling and maybe fan mail for yourself. But I always take the time every day to stretch. And then usually during the week, I'll go for a run in the morning. And I find that that's really my saving grace. And then in the evening, what I've been doing in the last couple of months during, kind of COVID, is I actually been taking like a hot bath at night, for like a half an hour. And that's been like not only a great way to kind of like unwind, sort of like lower the blood pressure and like kind of sweat out the toxins. It's also been helping me sleep better.
Wow.
So for anyone out there, who may be interested, those are three things that I have personally found to be, useful. So I will, Limor, I want to, obviously, talk a little bit more about, what you're doing, with your practice and the exciting news that you have to share. So this idea of finding additional support. So, there's, with all the challenges that both students and parents are facing right now, a lot of families are looking for additional support from psychologists and therapists like yourself. What advice do you have for parents who aren't quite sure whether a psychologist or therapist is the right option for them?
Right. I think that that's a good question. And I think just the best thing to do is just call and ask. Just ask, call. I always say call 2 or even 3 therapists and see who you feel connected with. And, like it's like, what are the issues that your child is dealing with? And I think just if you are thinking that there is something to be concerned about, you don't want to wait until things get really, really bad, which is unfortunately what a lot of people are doing. They're waiting until things get really bad before they, tackle the problem. And what I found, unfortunately, with a lot of parents is that there is a lot of stigma. This practice that I have is like I designed it like a home. So it's all like a cool, like beautiful, like space for kids to feel comfortable. And a lot of parents are just like really, the kids don't care if they come out of a, yoga studio or therapy, but the parents they would say, oh, make sure nobody sees them when they leave so that they don't think they're coming out of a therapy office. And so if I can have an advice for the parent is like, do not like put any negative like kind of energy on that therapy support. That if your child needs it, just have them see someone. The worst thing that can happen is like they see someone and it doesn't work, but at least your child can have space to express his thoughts and feelings, and that's really important.
So for parents who do decide to seek a therapist or a psychologist, what exactly should they be looking for? So like beyond qualifications, testimonials, and so on, how can they determine, who's a really good fit on a personal level?
That's a very good question. And I think, like just the personality of the therapist, and like pick up the phone and call and see how it feels to talk to the therapist. And definitely ask what modality the therapy is using. If
Okay.
the therapist is more psychodynamically oriented, then they're more into the talk therapy. And oh, sorry, my dog just scared me. But if they're more like cognitive behavior therapy or evidence-based technique like dialectical behavior therapy, basically you want to know what modality the therapist is using, but a lot of parents don't even know. So I think like kind of look into what type of therapist out there. What is the personality of the therapist? I mean, with teenagers, it's, like, do you want someone who will just nod his head and listen, or do you want somebody that's more interactive? So I think take into consideration the personality of your child and the
Right.
personality of the therapist and seeing if it's a good match.
So you were talking before about this idea of modalities, which I find really kind of fascinating. And I know that your own practice is structured around the karma method. What is that exactly?
Right. So, and I love that you mentioned writing before. So basically, when I looked back at my experiences and I was curious as to like how I was able to come out of my, years of hating myself and thinking that I'm stupid, ugly, and fat and abusing myself for so many years, I realized that there was a pattern to what was happening. So I had to go through these 5 steps of, what I call karma, and in order to overcome my challenges. And K stands for knowledge and awareness. A is acceptance. R is releasing the past. M is making meaning. And A is authenticity. So what I realized that when people go to therapy or in anything, in anywhere you go, right, there's no process. Like I went to the therapist and I was talking and I was like, great. And I was crying for years and I felt sorry for myself, but I
Mhm.
never really got like, first of all, there wasn't a process. Like I didn't feel like there was a beginning and there was an end. And there's so many incredible skills that you can have using, from psychology, from coaching, but a lot of therapists don't use them for some reason. So I think that like using the karma method, basically it's a 12-week program that I have, and we now have a bunch of after school program that we are executing the karma method in more creative ways, which is really cool. But having your, working with someone and having a start day where you're actually being assessed, like where are you on the wellness scale? We even offer a personality test to see what is your personality, and are you more of a type to go week by week through the karma, or are you more like you were talking about, making meaning? So it's very it's more complicated, but we don't have time. So I'll send you the link for the karma method if you want more information.
Yeah, that'd be great. But I also wanted to quickly talk about, we had it's come up a few times. You recently opened up a new family wellness center on the Upper East Side. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Right. So one of my dreams is to open, like a center where teenagers can come and they can see a therapy, they can do yoga, they can see a dietitian. We have a medical doctor who joined us, and it's basically a very holistic way of working with individuals and families. So, if I see someone who has whatever, anxiety or depression, then we're making sure that, if he's interested, to also see a dietitian and seeing what's happening with his nutrition. And he works with our yoga teacher and the trainer. So you're kind of getting all around support, and especially for teenagers and college students who need it desperately. I mean, I feel like this is it's a little more challenging with COVID, but we've been managing and doing pretty well virtually too. So it's kind of interesting.
So actually, my last question was, especially because of COVID and things have to happen virtually or remotely. What resources do you recommend for parents and students who are looking for extra support?
I mean, I think that, like always reach out. I mean, you can call your insurance and find a therapist. Just to have someone that you can talk to virtually is great.
Mhm.
And I mean, sometimes you can look into your community for other resources and support. I mean, they might, but it is very challenging now with COVID. But I mean, I think it is still important if you have a therapist that will see your child or the family in an office, as long as we have a lot of HEPA filters around. So, and you follow the COVID guidelines, it's crazy. This is like the most exciting thing we have now is a thermometer on the wall that you take a temperature and you put on, and it connects to an app. This is like the excitement of our day now, that it alerts you have a fever. But you just try to. I think it's still important for kids to get out of the house and see someone if they're really struggling. So don't be ashamed. Like if you need support, like it is out there.
Well, thanks for that. So we're run on time here. We're gonna go now to a little Q&A, and there's been a number of questions that were submitted in the registrations, and I'll get to those. I'll kind of like look at the ones that we probably haven't touched upon yet. But for people who are still on the call, you can if you have any questions right now, please put them into the Q&A panel, and I can attend to those live. But as people start to get themselves sort of organized in the Q&A panel, I'll go to a couple of these questions here. So this is what we haven't talked about. What have you seen in your research and your reading, Limor? What are some of the side effects of staring at a screen all day and never actually seeing or engaging with teachers or peers? Side effects of online learning. What have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, I'm not a medical doctor, but I do see more of like symptoms of, like attention deficit disorder, and kids are having a much harder time, focusing and doing one thing at a time. And it's just like, I mean, they're always like a lot of the kids I'm seeing, they're agitated, even like sometimes when they come here, like, they have to put their phone away, but, they're so used to staring at the screen, like so many hours of the day, that when they're not, it's like they don't even know what to do with themselves. They're feeling lost. So,
I know in my own experience, which has been exactly that, we have really, living up, we live up in Maine right now, and it's been about going outside, and it's actually been a real struggle to get the kids to go outside, and having the dog has actually been really useful in that respect. The dog has to go out, you know, take the dog out, and that's going to sort of force them to do it. And I find that especially with the younger kids, as soon as you kind of get them going on like the new thing, they're usually okay to kind of stick with it. Do you
Yeah.
know? So for people who are asking these questions with side effects, like Limor is saying, like, they want to stay on these screens and they want to actually, keep playing games, whatever, just find a way to sort of like change that context. A question came in here about applying to high school this fall, sort of an academic or admissions question. How do we get a child enthusiastic about the process when they feel so disconnected? I'll sort of like go back to something that was said earlier. Is that frame high school admissions as a building block, a step in a much larger, exciting experience. And I think that a way for middle school students to really kind of connect with that is to really focus on the different experiences that they're going to have when they go to XYZ school. So that's how you get the student excited about the process is, look, it's not going to last forever. We're going to get the pandemic, COVID-19 under control. There will be, you know, we will live our lives in a way that was closer to what it was than to what it is currently. And, at some of the schools in, whether it's in New York or, elsewhere, there are great experiences to be had. And so focusing on that will help in the process. So this is a cool question, Limor. What are the best and safest methods to maintain students' social skills? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean and they always like talk about like social distancing, but it's really physical distancing, right? I mean, why are they saying
Yeah,
social?
physical
It's
distancing.
physical.
Yeah.
So I feel it's like even like you want to, again, like model that behavior. I forgot what study it was that the average parent only interact with their kids for 6 minutes a day
Oh,
before the COVID, which was like crazy and mostly like, hi, how are you? But I think
right.
just like you kind of model that social interaction and be really curious about your child and encourage them to socialize. I mean, even if it's like through FaceTime, even if it's seeing certain people, and encourage them to get out of the house and to to communicate and to practice these social skills that many of us like forgot.
Yeah, I mean, in our situation, there's like maybe two or three families, people will call it podding, so to speak, where, all of our kids don't have COVID. And we're not doing play dates all day. We're not doing play dates inside. We're not doing play dates with 50,000 kids. It's like two kids, three kids. We had our daughter's birthday party 2 weekends ago, outside for three of her friends, and it was great. We observed physical distancing protocols. That was sort of an agreement amongst all the parents, and it you have to be creative with what you're going to be
Yeah.
doing. That's also kind of fun. So again, we can continue to build our social skills if within the physical kind of restrictions that we're facing today. So Limor, last question before we sort of wrap up here. I found this really kind of interesting. How do you handle having your face and emotions on display during
Mhm.
all day Zoom classes? It's exhausting. What are your thoughts on that?
I know it really is exhausting, especially when like when you have so many expressions like me and you talk with your hands, like you are like an Israeli with your hands. But I think that you know it's how you look at it, right? I mean, you can look at it and just be more mindful of like what's happening and how you move your face and judge yourself, or you can look at yourself and just maybe learn more about yourself and how you are feeling. But I think it's just like don't judge yourself. I feel like that's like the biggest, like the main headline is like when you look at your face, when you move your face so much, just try not to judge yourself and be kind to yourself. That's my last couple of words.
And I'll say, and this is a webinar for another time, that just because you look a certain way doesn't mean that you actually feel that way. So thank you all for attending. And one of the things that we've sort of organized with Limor is she is, as a thank you for attending the webinar, she's extending a special offer to webinar attendees. And specifically, it's for virtual therapy sessions at 50% off, which is amazing. So how do we do that? We call bespoke 917-670-9780 and mention this webinar to get started. And again, it's whether it's for the teenager or for the parent, if it's for the family in general, you can use this offer however you wish to kind of help your family kind of get back on track and in a more productive and healthy sort of environment and kind of culture inside. And then just simply finally, you can always contact either Limor and her team or the case team and me at our different contact access points. And Limor, do you have any final insights or parting wisdom for families facing questions regarding mental health and wellness? How do they adjust? How do they thrive this school year? Any parting
Yeah,
part of?
no, I think it's just like take it like, a moment at a time, a day at a time. I mean, try to just, enjoy the little things. I feel like that's, just the little things in life, just enjoy them and be grateful. And I love your suggestion with writing 3 things a day that you love about yourself or anything that you're grateful for. Just these little things and, can make a big difference. So
Well,
that's my,
Lauren, thank you. You've been amazing as always. I can't wait to watch the video of this again and again and again so I can improve my own parenting. Thanks everybody for tuning
thank
in
you.
today. We'll be putting this webinar video up on Friday on the Kate's website, the webinars page. We'll also share it with our friends at Bespoke. Until then, be well, be safe, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good day.